Right, so let's jump into the news. I'm John, that's Josh over there, there's Dave.
I always wish I could hear the dramatic news intro whenever we're doing it.
It sound really cool, doesn't it?
Sort that out for us sometime. You know? Well, it's going
to cost you.
All right, guys, it's official, literally official. Smog season has started. As we record this, today's... Yeah, just getting started. 5 months of this. On the city's website today, we're recording this on Friday the 19th, by the way. On the city's website, we officially achieved, I guess it's called the first level of warning, first level of danger, I guess, on the scale. And
we're at the fourth level of danger on the scale.
Level. I read first.
The scale goes 0 to 50, good.
Wait, what?
51.
Well, what color is it? It's like the colored scale.
Yeah, it's a coloured scale. Yeah, and at the moment we're red. Red is never good on a colour scale.
No, that's true.
Okay, so the centre of Krakow is 1AA right now as we record. 1AA. You hear me?
Yeah. I'm just staring at the map in disbelief here.
Okay, so 50 to what? Like in Dublin, it never goes over 50. If it goes over 50, it's all over the news, all over the radio, as we covered it.
Dave, but in fairness to myself, though, it's entirely possible that between the time I saw the news about first degree and right now, we may have progressed three degrees on the scale of
no, you're not getting off the hook on this one.
Excessive Krakowian flatulence.
Well, anyway.
So just to illustrate for our guests what the scale represents, John, I'll just finish
bad
up
and
here.
Worse.
Yes, so 50 to 100 is moderate, yellow. 101 to 150 is unhealthy for sensitive groups. Members of sensitive groups may experience health effects. The general public is not likely to be affected.
Aren't we all sensitive?
And we are now 150 to 200, and that's where we lie at the moment, at the upper end of that. And that's everyone may begin to experience health effects. Members of sensitive groups may experience more serious health effects.
Aren't we all sensitive again? Who is
very sensitive? Yeah.
Well, it's got the foggy haze over the city today, and if the particle matter is that high, it ain't fog, it's smog.
All right, let's jump into this. Here's the question: How do we have smog this bad when the heating season hasn't even begun?
Good question, John. Good question, to which I don't have an... I mean, would people be using their heating a bit right now? I think
it was 19 degrees yesterday.
You wouldn't use your heating, but I said people.
No. But
in my experience of the heating industry, people would be turning their heating on at this time.
Maybe the heating in blocks, the central heating.
My heating has come on sporadically since the 30th of September, actually. So now it's like on a thermostat inside.
So it's not snowing, is your point, but it is chilly.
Well, you're not wearing shorts anymore, are you, John?
Well, I'm got my sandals
broken
on
out the blue jeans.
But wait a second. The people say the heating, the wood burning stoves and garbage burning furnaces out in the countryside. That's what really contributes to.
I'd like to just say
certainly those are not in full swing.
These hardly qualify as sandals. I mean,
these are like halfway between shoes and sandals.
98% of your foot is covered in heavy material. It's not a sandal.
Sandals.
No socks, though.
You could climb a mountain in them things.
No socks. I guess I could.
Also, actually, talking about the villages and stuff outside of Krakow, of course, average temperatures will be a degree or two cooler because you don't get the urban heat island effect.
That's true. Okay, that's true. But still, this is not the dead of winter, and all of these wood burning furnaces are not, burning 24/7. But we still have this horrible smog alert, even in the middle of October. So
I want to know how Nova Huta's got a slightly lower rating than everywhere. I thought they had lots of big chimneys and the steel factory belching fumes at them. Scavina's leading the way out in the edge of town. 191.
Yeah, Scavina.
Okay.
So what causes the smog? Is it the wood burn? And don't say all of the above. Is it the cars?
It is all of the above.
Is it just our natural geography? We're being in a kind of a geographical bowl, or is it the particulate matter from burning wood and garbage? What is it?
It is all of the above, but it's useful to parcel them out and discuss them one by one. Josh, I know the diesel fumes is something that you've been talking about recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because, of course, for several years now, European policy has been to encourage people to drive diesels because they emit less carbon dioxide. And
I think they've now done a U-turn.
I think they have now done a U-turn because, of course, there are arguments, I shall put this as neutrally as possible, there are arguments that rage about how harmful carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, but diesel cars produce particulates, which, for those who don't know, means very tiny little particles. Which
PM 2.5.
Which can get in your nasal passages and inflame them, which makes you incredibly snotty. And nitrous oxide, which is a considerably more harmful gas than carbon dioxide. So there's a weird kind of effect whereby more diesel cars means actually worse air quality. And of course, you compare that to petrol engine cars, which since the early 90s have to be fitted with catalytic converters, which means actually the air that comes out of the exhaust pipe of a petrol engine car is cleaner than the surrounding air.
Fascinating.
So actually,
It's
petrol
effectively
cars
cleaning
are
the
cleaning
air.
the atmosphere, yeah.
Well, that is interesting.
So the heavy traffic is simultaneously causing the smog and cleaning the air?
Well, it depends what
Now I'm
the
confused.
ratio of diesel engine to petrol engine cars is. And I suspect there's rather a lot more diesel cars and buses, of course.
But surely it's, I get what you're saying, the air going in, but it's petrol fuel in the car, so the exhaust is still adding to the total. I think we can agree. It's not the case that the air comes through one end of the car and goes out cleaner, so it's a strange.
No, there's, I mean...
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
The actual exhaust fume, is nowhere near as bad as diesel, and that exhaust fume will have a less particulate in it than the actual surrounding air, but it's still adding to the total.
Well, one of the things is, in years gone by, you could kind of lock yourself in your garage and, turn the car engine on and you would die within... a short period of
Those
time
were
of
the good
carbon
old days.
monoxide poisoning. Now, modern petrol engine cars do not emit carbon monoxide, and that has vastly improved air quality in, every city, really.
Fewer people killing themselves in garages, too.
I mean, look at LA. Wasn't that the thing in LA? They banned leaded petrol and pretty much they cleaned the problem up.
I don't know if it cleaned it up. I guess
lead
it
is
contributed.
another issue altogether because, it was also... There was actually, and this... has been properly studied. There was actually a net average drop in IQ for the period when lead was regularly added to gasoline in the United States. And
this is pre-Kardashian, so
I believe so. Yeah,
so we must be really bad off now.
But that's a whole other thing. But yeah, lead in petrol is
You know what I'd love to know? This is an impossible theoretical, but what do you think? Let's say let's take a statistical measure of the smog in Krakow on the worst day. Let's say that's 100. That's level 100. If, again, theoretically, you removed every single car on the road, Krakow completely cleared of cars, how much would that impact the smog rating of that one day? By 5 or 50 or 90 or what?
I'm only guessing, but I'd say more like a third. I'd say over half of it is domestic and commercial heating stacks still, because they just belch so much coal fume up into the atmosphere. If you've ever been in where I come from, we have what we call housing estates. So you'll have a couple of hundred houses around a couple of big fields, and most of those houses will be using gas. But you'll always have one guy who decides, no, I'm going to burn my coal fire. And the contrast, just to see this gas fire, excuse me, just to see the smoke coming out of the chimney, it's just phenomenal, the amount of it that will belch out in a couple of hours. Just on a biblical scale compared to a car exhaust, so definitely it would help if you the air quality, but nobody would be able to get to work. The interesting thing I always think, though, there's a part of the argument in Krakow is that, it's the geography is part of it, and that's exactly true. It is really part of the problem. However, we should flip it around and use it as a kind of inspiration. We should say, okay, we're already at a disadvantage geographically for particulate matter sticking in the air and not being cleared off naturally by wind. So we need to be even better with our strategies. We need to make sure that the gas conversion program in the city is, and there's a municipal heating scheme going on now. That's the right way to go.
Yeah.
But, these things move slowly, and people can be very stubborn when it comes to any kind of saving on their domestic house bills.
Well, as I understand it, our soon-to-be re-elected mayor is going to is kind of spearheading this very point.
He has a plan.
Not only that,
he
but
has a plan.
Boasting about how far ahead of other Polish cities Krakow is.
Part of the smog, kind of a crossover between the local election news that we'll talk about later and the smog issue. Last week, who was it in Warsaw criticized?
The Prime Minister was.
The Prime Minister, Morawiecki criticized Krakow for, I guess, not doing enough.
Well, he criticized local authorities around the country, I believe.
Local authorities, translation, Majorowski. And Majorowski's, Dave, tell us about Majorowski's rather pointed rebuttal, and pointed and highly questionable and factually rebuttal to the criticism.
Yes, Majorowski released an astonishing statement, I thought. He's not known for being aggressive and making bold claims, and I think the election's...
Very low-key.
Yes, the election's gone to his head. Listen to this. Astonishing stuff. The city of Krakow is perceived throughout Poland as a model to follow in the implementation of assistance programs related to the improvement of air quality. News to me, I was like... At many scientific conferences, we are presented as a leader of changes in this field, said Microsky. That's astonishing, isn't it?
You get the feeling that
he's boasting about his record on Smog.
You get the feeling this press release was supposed to be released on a totally different subject, and it got mixed up in the mayor's office. It was supposed to be on, I don't know, primary education or something like that. Like we're the best, and they said no, this is about smog.
It reads like the statement of a man who's been breathing in leaded petrol,
or a politician.
Yeah. Also, this article
up for re-election.
This article that you sent me, actually, John, it's a Google Translate job for me. You know, I'm reading it here, and it has quite a funny translation.
Okay.
It says, in the last 5 years, over 20,000 people have been liquidated in Krakow.
Where's the media?
This is a scary plan you've got, dude.
How did we miss that?
Yeah, some kind of pogrom.
We should do a whole show on that one.
Yeah, so he's boasting about his record on Smog. I find that astonishing.
I don't know what he's boasting about exactly. They're kind of short on specifics there, but unless there's something we're not familiar with, I think he's full of shit.
The city looked like some old, Victorian London, the way you see it described, Jack the Ripper and the smog falling over the Thames. That's what I was reminded of today. Like, it was just horrible out there.
Earlier today, I got up, I have a what do you call it, like a home air purifier that I bought last year. And I got it out of the closet today. I figured it was time to put it to work. And I plugged it in, and it gets going, and it has this circle that lights up on the front, and it's 3 colors. Blue means everything's fine. Purple means could be better, working on it. Red, of course, means run for your life. You're all going to die. And the damn thing, I turned it on. It was red for a good 3 to 4 minutes solid. Then it was purple for about 20 minutes solid. And then as I was leaving to come in here a couple hours ago, it was alternating back and forth between blue and purple. And this is after it had been running for, at that point, 4 hours, 5 hours, maybe something like that.
It is, it's astonishing. It really is.
Kids today, little kids with those masks, that's really sad and depressing. When you see little 5-year-old kids have to wear, the parents make them wear masks when they go outside. It's pathetic.
Everyone is running around in those masks.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a degree of kind of, 21st century problems here going on because, I mean, it's nothing like the level of atmospheric pollution that... and I was living in London in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, that's a reasonable point, Josh, an absolutely reasonable point. But it also belies the fact that we easily could solve this problem. That's what's so frustrating about it. In London and Dublin, we did solve this problem. It's not that difficult. The cars thing, you can just about sustain car pollution. Mm-hmm. It's not pleasant, but it's not, what we experience in Krakow. That's why I'm firmly... a hunter of these coal stacks. I think it's all down to that.
So what are we going to do?
Well, I think also, it does get mentioned, but perhaps not enough. And I think one of the things is, of course, the price of coal has gone up a lot, and there are still a fair number of people on, very, very low incomes. And when heating is one of your basic necessities, and when the cost of heating, because of the cost of the energy source, which is coal, gets more expensive, then the temptation to throw your rubbish in the boiler and the furnace as well becomes much greater.
So how about some draconian, like public execution level punishments for people who burn trash in their furnaces at home?
That's a start, I think, yeah.
Yeah? So we agree on public executions. And what? How do we get here?
I don't know. Ooh, there's 20,000 so far already, apparently, according to our glorious leader.
Moving on, let's go to a completely different subject. Last week in Warsaw, 1,500 taxis staged an organized event where they intentionally blocked the traffic in the center of the city, bringing things to a standstill.
Is this because they know for a fact an Uber driver can only follow their sat-nav and will never figure out an alternative route around their block?
Exactly. As Dave says, it's all about Uber. Now, we had this is in Warsaw, as I mentioned, but we had similar actions here in Krakow about 18 months ago maybe. And the issue is it's never really gone away, but we haven't had a big event like this in some time. The legal status of Uber, to my knowledge, I think, has really not been finally resolved in Poland. From time to time, you still see people who get pulled over in different locations and fined the driver. That is not the rider, as far as I'm aware. Right. Is this a fight where the taxi drivers have any chance of winning, or are they
They'll preserve the centre of the city, but it's becoming a loser battle all around the world for taxi drivers, I would say.
Yeah. Well, maybe taxi drivers need to go out and get more hot dinners for people.
But strap them on their back in a bright green bag and cycle
Things are
aggressively.
everywhere. My God, they're
It's
everywhere.
unbelievable, isn't it?
I've said it. I just cannot believe how many people all along just wanted to eat McDonald's at home. They don't want all these fancy takeaways. They just want Mackie D's on the couch, man.
Yeah, without McDonald's, there is no Uber Eats.
I would love to see the statistics on how many of their orders are just Mackie D's.
Oh, that's
Hey, maybe that's a future
Clear
program.
majority.
Find who's the
Look into
local
that.
like Uber boss and get.
We're going to have to invent a collective noun for Uber Eats cyclists sitting around outside a shopping centre waiting on their next call. There's always about 15 of them outside Galeria Cashmere's, and they're just sitting around in their big green bags.
sitting in the McDonald's close to me. They sit inside, like by the counter, waiting
He
for
needs to
orders.
ban that Galeria Cashmere's.
So, do we have any sympathy for the taxi drivers here?
Not really, no.
Well, I would have some sympathy for the.
Wow, Josh, that was really harsh.
I would have some sympathy for the fact that Uber could, their whole business model is jumping into the grey area between, effective legislation and people wanting a service. That's where the online companies have stolen a march on different corporate entities. Is they've identified a gap in the market. People want, a young, funky, app-based technology to get around. But whenever I examine Uber's business model, I don't see how it was any different to when taxi companies in Dublin introduced apps on their phones. There's very few ways you can lower the cost of a driver and a car without just lowering the driver's wages. And there's certainly countries where taxi drivers are cartels and they're not ran correctly and they're, juicing people from the airport. It's
Well, I think
the price of getting a taxi from Krakow Airport, let me tell you, has shot up over the years. And you have to call a private firm now to pick you up around the corner. If you use one of the main cars, that's 100, 110's a lot every time. Sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, no. But I think the thing about cartels is precisely the point, really. I mean, up until very recent, I don't know if it still applies actually, but I mean, to be a taxi driver, an official yellow taxi driver in New York City, a badge or a medallion of which there is a very limited supply, is going to cost you $250,000 to $500,000, or at least that was up until very recently. And now Uber
It's worthless.
Yeah. And there are people who have basically mortgaged their entire working life to get one of these medallions.
And if you're a taxi driver in New York or even here in Krakow, and the city wants their registration fees and inspection fees and various, extra fees you have to pay for operating a taxi, and you see the Uber guy who is subject to none of this, I think it's perfectly reasonable and fair that you're asking, why am I paying? Why do I have to pay this and he doesn't? We're offering the same service.
And I mean, the
right?
argument is for kind of regulation or licensing is that gives you some kind of backstop, some kind of protection.
Yeah.
But actually, I mean, with Uber, you have the name and the type of vehicle and the registration number of the vehicle before you're even picked up.
Yeah.
Whereas in London, for example, with a black taxi, if you want to make a complaint, you have to get the driver's badge number, not the number that is on the plate on the back of the taxi, because drivers share cabs. But his badge number, his badge he's wearing, it's very easy for him to keep that out of your field of vision, and you have absolutely no comeback at all.
Mixed feelings about Uber. On one hand, their business model seems to be, we're not subject to registration and inspection rules because we're a tech company. It makes no sense, but that seems to be what it is. We're a tech company, so we don't have to do that. And we're so big and we have so much money behind us, we're just going to do it and let you keep suing us and losing until you give up.
But the other issue, of course, is that Uber drivers
exactly what I was saying.
are
Yeah,
not
I agree.
employees, they're contractors. And there's an issue, I mean, I don't know if it's...
Well, there's a lot of cases about that as well.
Yeah, and whether they should be paying VAT and,
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. At the end of the day, a taxi is a simple enough service. What you expected traditionally was a person who had to sit an exam, had to know the city that they were working in. And this is another thing, by the way, there's famously so many anecdotes of Uber drivers staring so intently at their sat nav that they end up back at the location that they started
they
from.
always stare at that thing. They
These
don't
guys
watch
are
the
not
road.
experts. There is an absolute... I can tell you now, personally, my dad knows every street in Dublin pretty much on the south side. He doesn't work on the north side. But I mean, that knowledge is hard won. It means that as a tradesman, he can get around the city, he can dodge traffic, he can get to his next job. It's something you can only really learn with years and years and years of practice. I honestly do think that at the end of the day, the problem with Uber is the rides are going to end up just as expensive. Once they crush the competition, establish themselves in a city, along with surge charges and the fact that these cities will find a way of clawing back some money off them, whether it be vetting, whether it be changing the status of their drivers from contractors to employees. in the end, you're just going to end up paying the same as we always
Exactly
did.
right. Right now, they're building market share, and you can be sure that 5 years from now, you'll be paying a lot more for Uber rides when the competition disappears.
Are they going to actually like flatten the competition? I mean, in this city, the competition is kind of, like iCar is, for many journeys is more convenient because you can go right into the centre. The cost is no greater or less. So they don't do surge pricing. Now, of course, if they cease to have drivers, if drivers kind of flee one company to work for another because the conditions are better, well, it's a market, isn't it? I mean, so you offer better terms, you get...
Very quick side note to this, which maybe ties into what we were talking about earlier with the smog and car traffic. It's interesting. Studies are coming online now that show conclusively, there's no doubt about it, and this is counterintuitive, but it's true. Uber, and in America there's a service called Lyft. I think it's in the UK as well, maybe. Same idea. Anyway, Uber is contributing, not diminishing, but contributing to greater traffic congestion. Again, counterintuitive, because the whole idea was, people are going to kind of carpool, and instead of 10 people using their own cars, those people are going to use one car over the course of a day. In fact, Uber's price and convenience are luring people into the back seats of those cars instead of taking public transport, instead of walking, right? And so I think that's true from my own experience, is that I've taken Uber trips because it's there and because it's easy, because I just didn't feel like walking when I normally would have walked had there been no Uber, or when I would have hopped on the tram if there had been no Uber. And so I think certainly here in the center of Krakow on a Friday night, a significant portion of the traffic is Uber traffic that wasn't there 5 years ago.
Interesting.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. And it's the curse of all public transport is what they call the last mile problem.
Yes.
All right, Dave, we were talking earlier about important news from the European Court of Justice, the ECG.
Well, I'd like to say we've been all over this. We've been trying to keep our listeners up to date with all the latest developments with the battle over the courts in Poland. And today, the ECJ told Poland to suspend their procedure over the Supreme Court, the overhaul that was ordered. And the Justice Minister, Ziobro, said that Warsaw would abide by the EU law. But he has also asked the country's constitutional court this week to rule on whether European law supersedes Poland's national laws. So everything rumbles on. We're in this period now. We're going to see if they actually go ahead and do it. Maybe they'll hold off a little bit. It looks like it's going to happen. I mean, what do you think, John?
There was never a question that Poland was going to lose this case, I think, in Brussels.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not like they didn't see it coming. They are going to appeal it. There were arguments made by Poland that haven't been taken into consideration yet as well, which was recent as well. So, yeah, it's going to roll on.
This idea that Ziobro, the justice minister, what was it again? He instructed the Polish court to determine whether or not European law supersedes overrules. Don't you think this is something they should have looked into before they joined the European Union? It seems like
judicial turkeys working for some kind of legal Christmas. Yeah,
it's like this is coming as a surprise to somebody in Warsaw. Wait, we have to listen to Brussels? What?
Well, it's a fact of the matter is, with all sorts of European rulings, this is something in Ireland that we eventually do sign it onto the books, onto the law, and some countries are better than others when it comes to this. The Brits were never too keen on signing some of the.
Well, no, actually, there's an irony in that the United Kingdom has been one of the most enthusiastic followers of EU regulations and directives. When they say, "Oh, you must do that," and we go, "Oh, grown, okay," and then we go on and go ahead and do it. And in fact, there's
the British character.
Plenty of France, plenty of nations in the European Union that kind of very often even draft the guidelines and directives, but have absolutely no intention of adhering to them.
Well, I think that's what's going to happen here. I don't see Poland or let's say pieces behind this. I don't see them backing down. I really don't.
No.
Well, I mean, we covered this on our deep dive as well, which you should all listen to, by the way, people.
Very good, yes.
That's the whole structure of the EU. It's set up for a total consensus. There is no way of them, bulling into your country and saying, no, you must do this right now. It's not the way supranational government really works. It's about best practice, and that's why you see those terms always in these articles. Best practice, EU standards. That's the whole idea of the European Union, is They have a long discussion about what's the best way to do something. Let's say mobile phone tariffs on roaming, yeah? And after a while, they pass a judgment. And because businesses, etc., need predictability, somebody has to make the rules. Most of the countries in the EU end up eventually adapting as national law whatever the EU decided. But it is important to point out that not all countries do adopt every law. Not every country. Our Taoiseach recently was upbraided for being very slow to have one of the EU's laws written up, and he made the point quite forcefully that we actually do it properly. That's why it takes so long, and it had to go through Oireachtas committees and be approved, etc.
Something tells me this judicial review ordered by Jobro is going to take a long time.
Yeah.
I think the words judicial review and long time are virtually interchangeable.
Well, that's true as well. But I think Poland said to Brussels, look at Brussels, I'll tell you what, let us look into this. We'll get back to you. And looking into it's going to take probably 3 or 4 years.
Also, to note that Poland hasn't received the actual document yet. They haven't received the decision. And it's just to keep everyone updated that
they haven't gone to the post office to pick it up yet.
Pretty much, yeah. But you can be sure in the middle of Brexit negotiations, the EU leaders will not miss the chance to also pull Poland up over this. It's like a signal from the ECJ, okay, time to get the bats out and give everybody another paddle.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we don't want to drag this one on too long, but I mean, I'm sure there are some in the European Union that want to kind of step back a little bit from giving the impression too much that they are kind of ordering people around, and that somehow the nations that comprise the European Union are too obviously subordinate. Whilst on the other hand, there are those who say, well, no, we're the EU, we're in charge now, and if you don't obey our rules, then, you are going to, taste the consequences. So it's an interesting one, and of course, for British people soon to be on the outside looking at all of this, it is interesting.
Define soon.
Very good question, and I'll get back to you on that.
You're a temporary backstop.
In a little while.
Last thing on the news this week, local elections taking place all over the country this weekend on Sunday. Today, Friday, is the last day of campaigning.
Is this our get the vote out section, is it?
This is our, get the vote out if you...
Come on, kids.
If you feel like it, if you have nothing else to do and, can be bothered to
you
go
don't
down
vote,
to the polling
don't
station.
bitch, as they say.
Big deal here in Krakow. We've been talking about the mayor's race for some time. I think it's safe to go ahead and assume that there's going to be a runoff between Majchrowski and Wasserman.
Mm-hmm.
If the polls are worth anything, Majchrowski inexplicably still has this significant lead. I don't know how that's going to work out in a head-to-head versus Wasserman, but it's hard to imagine that he would somehow, come out on top in the first round and lose the second round. I don't know. What do you think?
I think exactly what you said. I think at the end of this election, they'll still control the majority of the local assemblies. I'm not sure, you always hear about the Warsaw race, which is huge in the national media at the moment, and it looks like that's going to be another win for the it's not exactly PO candidate, is it? It's a liberal coalition.
Alliance. Yeah,
it's this strangely undefined, vague coalition of outsiders that
I really don't want to butcher Rafael's second name. Could you say it?
I forgot already. The Rafael
Trzaskowski.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
that's as good as I can do against Mr. Yaki, and that's also looking like another runoff, easy enough victory for the incumbent.
Yeah, Warsaw.
Not the incumbent. The liberal
trophy
candidate.
in all these elections. It's the biggest deal, obviously. Something like I think of the 16 regional assemblies in the country, the voivodstvo, 15 of the 16 are not controlled by peace.
That's correct. And what I was thinking before the show is I should have researched what are the close races. We keep talking about Krakow and Warsaw, but it's looking like they're going to stay.
Katowice, the peace candidate has a good edge in Katowice. In the Gdynia, I think there's another also a liberal coalition going on, and the smaller cities like Lublin and maybe Poznan. I'm not sure, but it's just interesting that peace has. Again, 15 out of the 16 regional assemblies are not controlled by them, but they control the national government. It's just odd.
Yeah, it's like the Senate and the House of Representatives and the
complete opposites. Very, very strange. And just quickly on the subject of the mayor's race, we've covered this in the show, I don't know, 4 or 5 times in the last couple of months. I just want to state for the record that I contacted 5 different candidates directly through their offices, by email, by their Facebook page or whatever. None of them got back to me. Not a single one returned my inquiry. And last week...
except for Vala. Thanks, Vala.
Oh, except for Vala. Sorry. Of course, Vala. check out that interview as well. Very, very interesting, by the way. But last week, just purely by dumb luck accident, I ran into Łukasz Gibawa on Rondo Grzegorzetski. He was campaigning. He was giving out leaflets. Because I recognized him. I stopped. I talked to him. Really, really nice guy. We had a night. We must have talked for easily 15, 20 minutes.
You sent me the saddest selfie I've ever seen.
I took a really bad selfie.
I swear John bumped into a rock star. Like, you know.
I did take a
Stop
selfie.
Bon Jovi,
it was my
dude.
first selfie ever. But anyway, he was a really, really nice guy. And I said, Mr. Gabawa, will you come on our podcast? He said, yeah, absolutely, no problem. He gave me his card. He says, call my people. We'll set it up. I called your people 4 times, Mr. Gabawa. And
what he's trying to say,
I got
Łukasz,
nothing
is
in return.
You are more than welcome to come on the KrakCast.
Yes, I'm getting to that. I'm getting out the venom first.
Yeah, not very friendly.
But after the election, I know you're busy. But after the election,
that's
Mr.
better.
Gabawa, please come on. We want to talk to you about the race. We're going to assume, unfortunately, you're not going to be in those final 2. I hope I'm wrong.
But he's the kingmaker because his runoff votes are huge.
Exactly. So we want to talk to you about what it was like to run for mayor, what's next, and how you see the runoff turning out. So disappointed to not hear from you, but I understand you're busy. But again, just for our listeners, I want you to know, we invited everybody.
We might have to. We might have to accuse him if he doesn't come on. We might have to accuse him of being the first politician in history to ever lie to a voter on the street.
Ooh.
That would be an outrage.
Ducking the KrakCast.
Give me something light, John. Give me something light. Have you got any?
Let's finish on something light, Dave. Yeah, we were looking at this before we started recording. Little nugget I came across in the media this week. You know, I forgot what it's called.
I don't like the word nugget. It's just
a little bit
connotations, dude.
A little chicken nugget. I don't know something. A little piece of interest I noticed in the paper. When you get married in the church, you're supposed to donate being in quotation marks, donate some money to the church. You know, and thanks for their services, to show your appreciation for what they've done for you. And it's a big topic of conversation among people. How much should you give, right? You don't want to give too much. You don't want to overpay, so to speak. But at the same time, you don't want to offend the church and give them, nothing. So how much should you pay? Well, we found an interesting article that gives the average amount that people pay. Dave, what does it say?
I don't know.
It says, I can remember, the average is 532 zloty.
I think we gave around that. I can't really remember now when we were married. Oh, yeah. I have to say it's also a tradition in Ireland, I'm pretty sure.
For those of you listening who don't know, 500, let's call it roughly 100
Is that the
British
best
pounds.
value you ever get from the Catholic Church? Right. Like every time you go to Mass, in Poland, by the way, you have an extremely cheeky tradition of sending around 2 collection plates per Mass.
Do you not do that in
No,
Ireland?
just the one in Ireland,
Maybe he does 2 rounds, maybe. Through the
why are you doing it twice? Is it kind of like, it very much feels like you didn't give enough the first time, It's just one of those business practices I disagree with. It makes me feel squeezed as a client of the church.
Is that what they call double dipping?
Yeah, well,
Dave, you want to tell us last time you gave money at the church during Mass?
Well, every time I go to Mass,
keep going.
Which is, often.
Christmas 1999.
I love an old pray.
I think my last time was your wedding, actually, John.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Did you give money for that?
I real money from my pocket, yeah.
Yeah, a couple of coins, huh? The jingle?
Whatever the, yeah.
I would always put a few coins in if I was at a wedding or something. But
So you think 500 is reasonable? You think
here's
fair?
my thing, right?
What's your thing?
It's not great value in general going to church. You're always getting squeezed for money. But when you're getting married, they are supplying you. In my case, I was married in Peter and Paul's Basilica on Grodzka. That was my parish
Me too.
church at the time because I lived around the corner on a street.
What's it called?
Gertrude?
Gertrude, that's the one. And
Yeah, you're welcome.
so basically, I thought, for the fact that he did the rehearsal, he looked after us, he told us what to expect, he married us, he was a lovely guy, our priest was great. I thought it was pretty good value for. I think we gave him 400 or 500.
That was your thing. Here's my thing.
Got to sign a giant book.
Let's be brutally honest. A good number of people, maybe more than half the people, when they get married these days, they're using the church as a setting for their not because of it's a house of God.
Yeah, that's
it makes pretty pictures.
What's wrong with that?
Right? What's wrong with that? Oh, come on.
Why do you build a massive basilica if you don't want people to stand around taking pictures of it? Come on,
the people getting married have no spiritual connection with the church.
Are we not spiritual enough for you, John?
No, not at all. And so you're basically using it as a prop. So I think paying 500 zlotys to use the church.
Would you listen to Ominous Dominus Joninus Adkins over here? How spiritual are you?
0.
I I think it should be added actually that if you want to get married in a Church of England church in Great Britain, it's going to cost you a few quid.
Yeah, because there is...
Especially if you want like an organist and a choir and bell ringers, they all... ratchet. And I know this because my sister, my mother, all bell ringers. My sister sang in church choir, and weddings were great, especially when you were still at school, because you got a bunch of money for that.
And look, I mean, good churches are fabulous buildings. How much do you slave over the venue for your reception? And, and you're looking around, and usually it's pretty easy to get a spectacular church if you live, especially if you live in Krakow. I mean, there is the element though that in Krakow, if you get married in one of those main churches, you've got your time slot. And that's it. There's another crowd coming in behind you, and also tourists can come in and have a look, which actually is okay, because it's a massive space. But I couldn't actually fault the Catholic Church on their church building. It's the one area they always excelled in. Fabulous buildings.
No, the buildings are great. I'm just saying you're basically renting it for an hour for your wedding, essentially. And 500 zlotys is more than fair for an hour of renting their building. I
would say it's more than fair, John. Do you want to go to Mass on Sunday?
I think I'm busy.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, there you have it.
Not very spiritual, John.
We start on Smog. We finish on not going to Mass this weekend or any weekend, really.
We got nothing about the Nazis. Nothing.
Up until that point.
Not until you mention them, no. But maybe we should keep the streak alive. What do you think?
Damn Nazis.
Nazi show. Anyway, that's the news for this week. We'll see you next time on the KrakCast.